We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If folks could take their seats, that would be wonderful. My name is Nicole Maher, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the Equity Committee. And today, I get the pure joy of co-chairing this meeting with my partner in crime, Dick Withnell. So it's our honor to welcome you all here. We have a very packed agenda, and we are doing a grand experiment today, which is to join our two committees together and to work through our investments and have those conversations collectively. So this is our first time meeting together as a group, so we wanted to extend a warm welcome to Northwest Health Foundation. Thank you for joining us in our building. And also take a moment and allow folks to introduce themselves, just in case you all have not met each other. Before we do introductions, I would love to invite Dick, if you have any other welcoming remarks you'd like to add on.
No, not really. Just the people that are on the phone, please put your phones on mute so we don't hear the heavy breathing for that. Welcome, everybody. And Nicole, thank you for hosting this beautiful facility. First time I've been in since the remodel. So we should go with the introductions then.
That sounds good.
Okay, my name's Dick Withnell from Salem.
Ron Saxton. Duncan Wise.
Lindsay Epps.
Shondine Garcia.
Megan Cannon with back.
Rob Saxton with AD.
Whitney Groves.
Danny Ledesma with the Governor's Office.
Janet Smith.
Ramon Ramirez.
Samuel Henry.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we are going to jump into our first agenda item, which is to invite Shondine Garcia, who is the Research and Policy Deputy Director on behalf of the OEIB, to give us her recommendations and thoughts about the high school equivalency budget recommendation.
Thank you. I'm not going to take up a lot of time with this presentation, so it's going to be shorter than the ones that you've been used to, because we have a very ambitious agenda today. So if you, thank you. So I appreciate understanding that I'm going to kind of be flying through this in an effort to help us meet our agenda demands. The process happened before I came on board, but essentially it was a research committee that was comprised of a multitude of stakeholders, including business, districts, community college, nonprofit, workforce, to all talk about the changes to the new high school equivalency program. You'll hear me say high school equivalency instead of GED a lot, and the reason for that is GED became a trademark when Pearson purchased it. And so, which is going to, affect the way you see it. It's all over the place in the law. You'll see GED, which a lot of states are now having to change the language alone. So if you hear me say HSE or high school equivalency, it's not because I believe we're stepping away from the test, but to acknowledge the fact that it is a trademark now. So the committee came up with 3 strategies, and one was to create an aligned high school equivalency system by eliminating the mixed messages. So as a former administrator in schools, there wasn't a clear message about when the changes came, how we were supposed to implement the new GED. Many organizations, from the state had different ideas about it, but there wasn't a clear message. This, as an administrator, is how we felt a little bit, that people were trying to help us be safe, put us in the right direction, but then redirect us in another, but all with the intent to help these students who need to get their high school equivalency. So the recommendation is pretty straightforward. We need one message that we can all understand so that we can implement HSE effectively in Oregon. The outcomes are the Achievement Compact. Quite frankly, the outcomes are very straightforward. It's graduates. It's increasing the number of students with high school equivalency. With the new GED, it's more rigorous and aligned to Common Core state standards. Very different than the previous one. It requires subject mastery among the people that are teaching it, which is a little bit different than a skill set and helping pass a little bit of math, a little bit of English. I took it myself, and it is definitely more rigorous.
You pass?
I did, but I was nervous when I hit some of the math questions. Strategy 2, create community-based high school equivalency training and/or testing centers. The idea is there are community organizations that have culturally responsive practices that are successful. We would like to maximize on those that are out there. And here's why. If you'll indulge me an explanation for a second of an activity that I've done many times as an administrator with teachers and community members. I'm not going to have you do it, but I'm going to walk you through it. It'll take about a minute tops. So, whoops, let me go back one. So if you think about, I would have people get into groups and write this down on a sheet of paper. These are, your language, education, be it formal or informal, your family, religion, belief, value system. If you didn't have a religion, that's fine. Your friends, your skill set. You would get into groups and you would talk about, if I had to eliminate one, what would it be? The group would talk, and most everybody, if you had to, like gun to your head, had to give it up for whatever reason, most people in groups choose, well, skills, career. I could live without it. If I had to live without it, I could. And then you would discuss and talk about why. Why was that a choice that you made? Then you would discuss again in your group, okay, if you had to choose another one. Many people would choose, okay, I could live without my degree, I could live without my education, formal or informal, and so on. And people would discuss it, talk back about what the group, about what it meant, if I had to give up my friends, if I had to, my belief, what are my family, my language, like what, and so you go through this exercise. And the idea of it, when I was an administrator talking to community members, is there are students, though the schools don't intend it, that are asked to leave some of these at the door before they enter. They have to enter the door without their language, or they have to enter the door leaving pieces that they're proud of their culture behind, because it's not necessarily manifesting itself in the curricular choices that are in the school or in the system and the paradigm and the way it's set up. Not because the school intentionally wants someone to do that, but because it's an unintended outcome of a mainstream school system. And so our idea would be that we would place the GED preparation, HSE preparation, in places that honor the whole student. The languages, the family, the skill set, community, belief system, formal and informal education, and friends. Strategy 3, defray the cost. It's $155 for the new test in order to create access. The long and the short of it is 11% of students right now don't have their high school equivalency. To give you an idea of what that means, it's the combined population of Salem and Eugene. These 3 strategies eliminate the mixed messages, center the preparation in places that believe in culturally specific and reinforcing practices, and defray the cost. We can meet 40-40-20 immediately. It can happen immediately. It's not like professional development, which though it's important, takes some time to set in place. This can have a timeline of tomorrow. That's it, long and short. Because we did an abbreviated version of this, you have in your packets all of the text that you saw that are congruent with the other presentations, that have the outcomes, that have the explanations, that have the specifics.
Can you give the 2-minute summary of what would you need in order to do this tomorrow?
Absolutely. So the first off, like just no matter what, figure out a way we can have demonstrable need for people that can't afford the high school, because it's $155. It's expensive, the test. So just money to help kids actually access the test at all.
How much money?
Well, we don't get specifics right now, but we'll probably more in the work group we will, because we're asking.
Give me a guess.
And that's
Well, the poverty rate among Oregonians without a diploma is 29%, right? And we're looking at it, 336,000 students or people that need this. The math would be, if we were to assume a certain percentage who don't have it, times 150. And I don't have the math on my head because we weren't doing numbers, I was told.
Everybody else speaking today, be warned, I didn't agree to no numbers. Okay, well that's, to me, the questions for all of us are going to be, you say it's a wonderful thing and we can do it tomorrow. So my question's going to be, okay, what do you need to do it tomorrow?
Absolutely.
If we can't discuss that, I don't know what we're doing.
I think there are organizations today that are ready to start housing GED preparation, HSE preparations today, especially with the shift. So you have say for example, the Boys and Girls Club in Eugene that was doing prep for the old test. They're ready to hit the ground running if we have a unified, here is how we do it. So we need to have a couple people hired in place that can unify that message and say, all right, we can go get the training today out to these organizations to start implementing it. They're ready. The places are geared to provide these services.
So I think that every person was instructed to not necessarily come with numbers because the process at this point is to sort of set priorities around
And in our last
strategies.
meeting, I violently disagreed with that.
Yeah.
I find that offensive, to be honest.
Well, I appreciate that, but that's not a decision that necessarily we have made. That's the decision that's been proposed by the staff. So if you're going to get frustrated with every single person that comes before us when they've been given different instructions, it's going to get really challenging. So I think we have to figure out a constructive way to move through this meeting and allow people to, share their piece.
I'm going to keep asking the questions.
Okay.
And I think it should have been a discussion that we had as a board, instead of just having staff tell us that's the way it's going to be, because there are a lot of great things. Some cost $1 million, some cost $50 million. As an investment and outcomes committee, I don't know what we're supposed to do other than sit and listen. And then at the last minute, it's going to be, well, you need to make a choice. And I don't have any information to do it, so I concur and have been frustrated through the entire process.
I think our two committees, it's the first time together. Our committee was very clear that we did not agree to those ground rules.
Okay. So this is the first time we've actually been part of this conversation. So,
Right.
I appreciate your frustration, but we also have a big group of folks who are here ready to participate and be in a conversation, and we have an hour and a half. So I think that's something we can take up with Nancy or the staff or in the most constructive way possible.
Quick question. Great report. There's the cost of the test, there's also the cost of the program itself delivered. What are you proposing there?
It's combined.
You're
So
saying- what do you-
the test, the program, everything is in the 150.
You're saying you can deliver a GED curriculum for $135?
No, the price of the test. No,
I know,
so
I
what's
was
the
asking, so I'm asking, what about the students in the program?
Sure.
How, I know for the community colleges, I believe, I always forget, that the community colleges get reimbursed for GED through the formula, I think. Is that right?
I think that's correct.
Yeah. But I assume that doesn't happen in the,
And so take, for example, an alternative school.
An alternative
right?
school,
So
yeah.
FTE is already allotted to do, GED prep instruction.
right.
And
But what
so-
about these nonprofits? Do they get compensated?
So it depends on how their system is set up. So a lot of them will offer certain supports like transition services for students. If that person can help implement, GED preparation or help, like say they have, so an example of Boys and Girls Club, one of the things that they did is they brought in, we had a person that was working at Boys and Girls Club already that helped with transition. So students that had dropped out of high school and didn't know where to go, so they would meet with them and then walk them through, here's how you sign up and get the classes at, your community college. Here is how you would access daycare for your, little ones. Here is how you would get the transportation. They would meet with them once a week to give them the skill set so that the class that they took at the community college was successful. So I think being creative around how they do it, because the bonus of something like a Boys and Girls Club, and I'm just using it as an example because I know it very well, is they're trusted and situated in a community and can respond to the needs of the students who, for whatever reason, that school was not able to meet the needs of that student. And so one of the reasons of housing some of those services in community-based organizations is a higher success of students being able to reach.
Right.
I think it's important to note that right now, some districts already contract with community colleges or nonprofits to do this work, and then other districts do it very differently, but there's sort of different strategies across the state, and it happens quite a diverse set of strategies,
Sure.
and those strategies are not necessarily connected or learning best practices from each other
Right.
or supported in the same way, although when we have seen where we've seen the most success of actually completion, there's certainly some trends, and I think that the work Shanita is presenting is really built off of that. I think we have Ramon and then Hannah.
Yeah, I did. Thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. But I did want to flag that I do have some concerns about some of the questions raised by the members of the Outcomes Committee. And since this is our first joint committee, moving forward, I think that would be really good if you could send us a memo or outline to us in the Equity and Partnership Committee, those very concerns, so that we have a kind of a well-rounded view of what's going on here. And so I haven't looked into all the materials yet on this, but I'm sure that some of us have your same concerns, right? So I think it would be more effective moving forward if you could share those with us. And I don't know if it's part of your committee, or is it just individuals, or was it a consensus within your group that raised at least 2 or 3 concerns that you flagged this morning?
Do you have a direct answer to that, Whitney, before we invite Hannah to speak, or?
Yes, I think I'll just give a little bit of context in process, which was what I was going to do as we moved into the discussion of the budget proposals, but it sounds like if I give it now, it might smooth the waters a little bit. So the process that we've designed, which is a process that came before the OEIB in detail and was approved by the subcommittee, was that the Outcomes and Investments Subcommittee would receive presentations from all of the agencies, boards, and commissions that we have invited to provide presentations. Presentations that included information about key priorities to address the outcomes. And so this Outcomes and Investments Subcommittee has been working through the process of hearing those. And we'll be spending the latter part of today, as well as a longer work session on August 21st, coming up with some recommendations that will help the governor in his process of putting together an actual budget. I think when we move into the discussion of particular proposals, Danny and I will be able to frame up for you more information about the cost of these proposals that will help you. It is obviously the governor's desire to be able to retain control over the budget process, and so having decisions about the particular dollar amounts within the subcommittee is not what he requested and not what the OEIB agreed to when it adopted the process that we put forward a few months ago. But we do understand that it's very hard to weigh and create priorities when you don't know if something costs $4 or $4 million, and so we'll provide some context for that. The Equity Subcommittee, I would love it if we could move into Nicole giving us an overview of the equity lens. We invited the Equity Subcommittee to come today to help the Outcomes and Investments Subcommittee begin to think about how you prioritize investment recommendations within the context of an equity lens. So obviously there's many ways that we can prioritize. We can prioritize based solely on cost, we can base solely on impact, and then we can look at the equity lens. And so the Equity Subcommittee has spent a lot of time thinking about it and is going to sort of put forward some thoughts, and then also be here to engage in the discussion of a few of the specific proposals. You'll see 9 of them on the big matrix. Those are the 9, what I call the 9 big ones, Ron, and based is dollar amounts. They're multi-million-dollar investment asks, and we'll engage in discussion around each of those specifically. So I think you'll find the conversation to be helpful, fruitful, and inclusive of all of the committee members when we get there.
Okay, great.
I think I'll just comment that just very briefly that not only the costs that we're talking about, but also what the return on investment is on those costs. So we need the both dollars and cents on the return on investment as well as the cost. So.
Okay. Hannah, you had a comment?
So when you were going through and doing this work, because a lot of our high schools have cut programs that did allow us to work with our students and make sure that they had the well-rounded education that met all of the 9 or 6 that you had up on there. And so did you look at what it would mean if we put those things back in our schools and we actually provided the students with the well-rounded education that I think most Oregonians want, versus trying to take it out and do things? I mean, we've got counselors across the state and all kinds of programs. So did you look at that?
I did, and I think your question brings up something that was an amazing part of my discovery when I was at a high school last year that offered the GED preparation. And what happened was, with the change in it, as it was changing, and I was looking at the changes and taking the practice tests, is we had someone that could teach study skills, but not content specific. So in that, subject specific. So in that, I started calling people and the amazing intellect of all of, I had the sign of mixed messages, but behind all of those mixed messages were just a pile of good thinking. They just weren't coming together. And so the immense opportunity of the collaborative efforts when we pull those people together with a single message and create organizations or work with organizations like I was talking about, it then will show how to meet the needs of students, and that collaboration between the high schools with those organizations will then help the high schools be able to bring programs like that back in. We had to shut down our GED prep at Springfield High School, give all of our support to Gateways, which is the alternative, with the hopes that when we create and make it more robust, we pull that back in, and then we've got 2 other locations that are creating culturally responsive practices to those students who were struggling with whatever their reasons or barriers to success were. So the idea is that we would start to replicate services that are successful. So not to take it out of high schools completely, but to work with organizations that are currently doing it well in order to help and work with the schools to learn how to do it better.
I think we're ready to move on. If there are any other questions or...
And we will be doing a work session that includes the GED proposal in more detail on the 21st of August in our final.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Okay, so really quickly, I'd like to invite you to take a moment and think about the equity lens with us on behalf of the Equity Committee. In your red packet, you've been given another copy of the equity lens, and on page 5 there's actually an addendum, and so I just want to call your attention to the purpose of this equity lens. We know that 38% of our children from the ages of 0 to 18 are people of color, and the children or immigrants themselves across this state. We know that while folks have a perception that the majority of the diversity in our state is concentrated in the metro area, we know that that is not true, and in fact, our 6 most diverse counties in this state are rural communities. We also know that our population of 0 to 5-year-olds across the state of Oregon have actually been majority minority since 2011. And so while we recognize this, we continue to see our growing diversity in our state struggle to gain access and opportunity in our educational system. And we of course know that the success of 40/40 is dependent on those students finding success and being in educational environments that meet their needs. That we through the equity lens have tried to make the strongest statement possible about our state's commitment to addressing those issues, and of course included a series of beliefs and values to really make the message clear about where we stand and what our perspective is as the highest educational governing board in the state. With that, we, I think, can recognize that in our first 2 years of investments, we have felt challenged in seeing the actual translation of these values, beliefs into actual investments and dollars spent. When we look at the $75 million that has been spent thus far, we recognize that many of those dollars, while well-intended and put to good use, have not necessarily taken the equity lens or its values into consideration. And as we are all learning through this process, we're attempting to do that through this outcomes and investment process. There's 8 questions that have been prepared that I would invite people to take a few minutes to look at and spend some time reading, and to really bring this lens with you as you are looking through each proposal. So folks want to take a couple minutes, and then certainly if you have any questions, very happy to address those. This is probably not every question that could be asked, but it's really should be taken as a starting place at this point. Folks have any questions or thoughts, clarifications needed? I would invite our staff members, if you had anything you feel like I missed that we should add to this little mini orientation. Great. Questions from either side of the house?
Those are really good questions.
Thanks. I think the appreciation goes to the staff more than the committee, but thanks. Okay. At this point, I'd love to invite Whitney to lead us through the review of the budget matrix and the beginning discussion of key priorities. It sounds like you may have began a little bit of that, but if you would like to proceed, we'd love to have you.
So in your packet, thank you so much, Nicole. Danny's going to help me lead you all through that, but I'll just orient you to what you have. You have a binder that has all of the detailed information that's been presented. So that would include the PowerPoints and the outcome template that the subcommittee created and every respondent filled out. And we have created this matrix for you, which is the legal size paper in your packet. And you will see that not all of the proposals are on here. We started with the first, I shouldn't say first, they weren't first in order, but we started with 9 proposals that were presented from Rob Saxton at OEE, Ben Cannon at the HEC, and Jonathan Lee and Megan Irwin at the Early Learning Division. Those proposals, I would say, make up the bulk of the large-scale proposals, either large in cost, $50 to $500 million cost. Ron, do you hear that? And his numbers. Or large in impact in that they're a proposed formula change or something that would have a statewide critical impact. So we decided to put these on for this work session. Since this is a short time frame, our next work session will be a longer time frame. We'll be able to sort of exercise our ability to discuss these proposals today with the help of the equity subcommittee. They can help us think about the equity questions in relation. So what you have in front of you, and we're just going to work our way through the proposals and take a moment to look at, we'll start with the first one, which was ODE's presentation around the priority strategy of third grade reading. You'll see a brief description, sort of sense of the scale of what Rob has proposed, the outcome being addressed, and then an equity analysis that was prepared by OEIB staff using the equity lens. And then a sense of whether this could be combined or leveraged with another investment that you've seen in front of you. So suggestion around how we might ask a couple of agencies to work together or how we might better strengthen or leverage a particular proposal. So I'm going to be, Danny, would you call it quiet reading time? We're going to have a
Silent sustained reading.
Silent sustained reading, a moment of that so that everyone can begin to think about the first proposal and wrap our minds, and then we're going to do discussion, and Danny will kind of facilitate and call on folks, and really it's just a time to bring all of your thoughts that you've been holding in for 3 months to the table.
And so I would just also, before we get into this activity, I think that, first of all, good morning, and I think that one of the things that's signs of a healthy group of folks working together is that there is tension in the room, right? And we're asking you to call upon different intelligences, right? To rely on different sets of skill sets. When we talk about the budget, this is a difficult exercise in that because we have to prioritize. And so what I would encourage the group to think about is not in terms of winners and losers, but to really think about, how do you set the stage for prioritizing a lot of different competing tensions that are here in the room. And I think that one of the things that we want to make sure doesn't get lost in today's discussion is that when you think about the heart of most Oregonians and you think about the values of Oregonians, when we talking about equity and issues of equity, we have some work to do. And so I would encourage us to not shy away from the difficult decisions or from the tension, but really to work together and continue to talk through these tensions. We hear that there's frustration about wanting to go to the numbers, but I think that if you'll allow us a little bit more time to sort of think through how can we talk about major components of these and going through this matrix, I think one of the things that we want to hear is more feedback about sort of what more information do you need? How exactly do we frame the investment, the impact, the return on the investment? And we'll continue to sort of have that dialogue. But again, we are going to call on you to use different intelligences, not just, Ron, I'm there with you. I just want to go to a spreadsheet and just talk about the cost per square foot, but we're gonna
Not
get
just a
there.
spreadsheet, if there
Right,
are 10
right.
columns, can't one of the columns have numbers in it?
Exactly. I think that we're gonna try to get you there, and we're certainly gonna hear your input about wanting to need numbers. But I do wanna take this time, I don't want us to overshadow the conversation about equity and about the conversation here with this want for more information about numbers. So let's continue to work through this tension in the room. I think we can get there, and I think we'll be better as a group for it. Pam has a question.
I do. I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Okay.
So I have a clarification question. So I understand we have the work session on August 21st,
That's right.
where we'll really roll up our sleeves and dig into this. What's our objective today then in going through these 9? Is it to get a common understanding between the two committees? Is it, I'm confused about what our objective is.
I think there's 2 objectives. So I think our first objective is that we wanted to give everyone on the 2 committees an opportunity to discuss the first big 9 concepts. So you've had, the Outcomes and Investment Committee has received a lot of information, but because of timing, they really haven't had an opportunity to have a discussion, to be able to sort of say, for example, I really like the 3rd grade reading, but I'm not sure about the return on the investment. If we were gonna get more
How would we know to
information
say
about
that?
numbers.
Exactly.
If we were gonna get more information on numbers, this would be the first one, and I'd want it to be framed like this, or, Rob, tell me more about the supports for chronically underperforming schools and districts. I think I get it, but I want more information. We didn't really get a chance, so the first part is to be able to let all of the committee members be able to sort of chew on that. You've gotten lots of paper and lots of presentation. This is your chance to
Getting all the
discuss.
questions out.
Yeah, and to start throwing ideas out there and to start acknowledging some of those tensions. The other objective is to think about, and we'll be doing prioritizing with many different lenses. Since we have the equity subcommittee here, we'd like you to focus in on that equity analysis. And if you were going to prioritize using an equity lens, what speaks to you, which of these begin to speak to you the most in terms of what you would want to prioritize given the opportunity gap, given the sort of tough road that we have to ensure that all students are learning, which one of these speaks to you and what would you prioritize as a game changer in terms of equity? And you have great resources around the table between the 2 committees to really sort of get there. So there's going to be a point where we cut off the conversation about the general lens and then sort of start trying to manage more of a conversation around equity. Is that okay? Are you guys mad about the silent sustained reading?
So I guess I just would add, not to just pile onto the spreadsheet point, but I think it's going to be hard to have a point of view on return on investment without knowing what the investment is. I mean, and a return on investment implies you know what the investment is.
Yeah.
And the other piece that I think would be super helpful is what magnitude on each of these are we talking about in terms of numbers of students impacted? So I look at this and it's like, well, maybe, say number 6, the quality early childcare, is that impacting a really small subgroup of people in 4 counties, or is this could potentially have a large impact over across the whole entire state? So I guess I'm looking for,
Right.
I don't have anything to make a return on investment.
Sure.
And then
And I think that's why we
apply
wanted to
equity.
focus the conversation more on more information that you need today, sort of give the discussion, because I think at the larger work session, we'll be able to get more of that detail for you. I think it's really a conversation about the altitude at which we want you to rest at right now. I think at this point, the governor is looking for, if you're thinking about our larger goals, our 40-40-20 goals, and the strategies that we think will get us there, you have a list of concepts that are strategies. We'd like feedback on these strategies, knowing that there's going to be a lot more work between now and December around sort of figuring out like what the number is, what the number could be, should be, and what's the, how we then start to do some more complicated math. I think that if I could just encourage you, again, to use some different intelligences and to sort of pull up in terms of altitude. We'll get to that place, but I think we wanted to have a higher level conversation about those strategies and sort of get a good understanding of what they are and start to think about what information you need about the impact.
And
So-
some of the information, Julia, we can provide today, if we're looking through them one by one, we can give you a sense of the scale and the number of students served and potentially the cost per student. We can get there
Yeah,
as
so
we discuss
that would be
them.
great. I would say I'd want that to be a separate column because that is super critical. Like, are we talking about 10 students or 60,000 students? It would make a difference on also how much time we should even spend thinking about or discussing a strategy. So,
That's good.
So when we talk about getting to 40-40-20, we've had districts and committees doing compacts for 2 years now. So they have strategies and tactics that they've sent in through their compacts. Can we get a list of those strategies that align with what's proposed here and what the educators out in the field are saying they need in the districts to be successful? Because I haven't seen any of that to really understand what do those schools believe they need to be successful. Do we have any data on?
The compact itself doesn't ask for strategies. We do have some unique goals that folks have set that have been pulled out of the compacts and put into a document that.
Each one does a report, right? Each district is asked to give a report.
No, just the compact, that's what we
I
collected.
thought
We can
they all
bring
do a
Peter in
report.
and he can provide more
So
information.
I like to know what it is they would like to have so that we can understand how we can make sure that as we prioritize that we're hearing from, I mean, they've had some really good conversations, I think, about where students are in particular districts and what they can do to move the dial to improve student achievement. So I think that would be really helpful.
And if you recall, many of the processes that have brought us up to this point, for example, the process used by the Early Learning Council involved the Early Learning Council taking feedback from a set of stakeholders and constituents. And so to this point, these really are ideas that have come from practice and from engagement and
Not from the districts and the educators.
Well, for example, the third grade reading one engaged a whole series of districts and third grade teachers and leaders from communities of color. I believe you participated in one of those meetings. There were many subsequent meetings that followed, so that had a pretty
And
deep.
there were about maybe 100 people in that room. I'm talking about the hours and hours that were spent in conversation about how do we get, because the third grade reading is one of our benchmarks. And so everyone was asked to create their targets, and I suppose if you're going to create a target, you would be creating strategies and tactics. I mean, I hope that's part of the process that all of us believe they've been going through. So how do we hear from them to make sure when we look at the proposal from ODE that it really does make sense to the districts? And as we talk about equity, we can't talk about just what Salem wants. We have to go all across the state. So I'd like to hear from them what it is they want. I think it would help me understand how we really do this work.
so we can bring, so it sounds like we're diving in.
Yeah,
Should we
yeah.
dive in? Go ahead, Duncan.
So on third grade, so let's start with third grade reading. Again, here's my thinking on it. One, I think it's a critically important goal. It's really important on the equity lens to get everyone reading at an early age because we know how important reading is for all subsequent learning beyond it. So I think I would support Rob in the goal. And I think we're roughly at 65% meeting benchmark today, and the numbers show that in terms of people, Oregonians of color and low income, they're far less. And so again, I think this is a really important goal, and I think it does, as we've suggested, start very early, well before kindergarten. So we really need to focus on this as part of the early childhood investment. So I support the goal. I'm not less comfortable with the proposal, however, in terms of how it approaches it. I think as in my mind, one of the key issues with the OEIB is this notion of prescriptive planning, saying this is what you need to spend money on versus saying this is an outcome that's really important for us and paying for it. And I think that is going to be a theme throughout this conversation. One, because to Hannah's point, I'm not sure we need to tell the districts directly how to get to the third grade reading. I think there's a lot of intelligence and a lot of different ways to get there. I do think it's really good to have things like response to intervention, which I truly support, as an available tool to districts. But I also recognize there's innovation that goes on all the time in districts that we need to be encouraging. And so I would be much more focused on where are you, district, and I would want to know exactly where every school is and where all the students in those schools are. And I would really encourage, as you look at this, to think more about paying for the outcome and adjusting the formula to say, when you get the third grade reading and design the formula in a way that gives potentially more resources, but also just directly pays for it. And so I think the tension I see in this proposal, and I think it's also in the ELL, is I think it creates a lot more flexibility and supports Hannah to pay for the outcome than it does to be prescriptive about how to achieve the outcome. And so I would fully support having a proposal on third grade reading. I think it's essential. I would encourage us to spend a bit more time thinking about the specifics of the proposal with that.
I'd like to say in the same breath, I agree 100%, Duncan, but we also, this is the choir, and out there, I think we need to sell the point, if that's the right word, to why is it important?
Yes.
You know, how does it affect the famous 9 initials, you know, OIA, DOC, and DHS? And that's what, 15 billion. So I mean, we need to convince the communities as a whole what the value is of what we're talking about here.
And I'll shut up. And the other big piece on this is full-day kindergarten, honestly, which is a huge number we've, I think, got to come to grips with. I mean, I know it's in the, I know we've got legislation, but knowing the number, I do know the number on that one. And while I think that could be one important piece for third grade reading and all future education, I think we have to weigh that against the early learning and other proposals.
So I have a comment from my perspective, and then we'll invite Ramon. So I fully support third grade reading as an investment. I think it's one of the most important investments we can make for Oregon, and certainly in gaining equitable outcomes. We actually, at Northwest Health Foundation, have identified third grade reading as actually one of the most important outcomes to improve lifelong health, because it's the best predictor of high school graduation, which is one of the best predictors of lifelong health as well. And we've had a particular focus on this as we've traveled to every county in the state and met with multiple districts in each county. And I agree with almost everything that you said, Duncan, but I am very concerned actually in the way that reading is taught throughout our districts, and the fact that there is absolute inconsistency in the way that reading is taught in kindergartens across the state. Our schools of education each teach teachers incredibly differently in how to do reading instruction. We literally have schools where you might have 4 kindergarten classes, 4 first grade classes, and reading is being taught differently in every single classroom. And this is information, kind of to speak to your point, Hannah, that we've heard, I have heard, and I think those doing work have heard from teacher after teacher after teacher. And you know, oftentimes many of them have a perspective on their way being the best way. Mm-hmm. And as we have seen reading programs rolled out across the state and not seeing the gains that we have wanted to see, I think that this is an area that we don't want to be prescriptive, but we also have to be honest with ourselves that allowing everyone to do something different is not getting our kids the best outcomes. And so I have a little bit of a different perspective from that experience and hearing directly from educators and school leaders. Certainly I want to just check my facts with Rob as you've, you know, what I'm sharing. I mean, is this something consistent or inconsistent with what you have observed as a...
I think your statements are right on, and what this proposal really asks for is for schools and districts to create a system that's consistent across and between grades and students who move through the system. It's not telling them that this is how you have to teach it, but it is saying that if you're a first grade teacher teaching reading, you need to know that the second grade teacher is going to teach in the same way, so that when students arrive from 4 different first grades, to that second grade teacher's classroom, he or she understands how those students have been taught and are ready to continue to move those students through a similar type of instructional system so that we don't confuse the students and we don't have students who are having to learn reading in multiple different ways as they move from one classroom to another, from kindergarten through third grade.
So just to add to that point, not only going from one grade to the next, but a lot of the mobility of a lot of students across schools during the school year. So if you start kindergarten at one school and because your family moves midway through the school year, that you're not getting a completely different program as well.
Ravon, I want to make sure you were.
Yeah, I had a question about number 2, actually. Can we just weigh in on, or what's the process?
I'll just make a process up as can we just maybe finish with the third grade reading and then go on to the next one? Does that seem good?
Hey Nicole, this is Nancy Golden. Is it possible for me to weigh in a little bit?
We would love for you to weigh in if it's about third grade reading.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. I wanted to talk about why I really support this proposal. I think what we have for years been giving allocations without necessarily putting a few sidebars on them. We've been meeting with about 50 people, we call it the Reading Equity Group, that reflect the faces of the children, and we have found that there are some culturally specific practices that we need to put in place. For example, the way we've been asking some of our families to support kids, if you just say, help your kids read, they interpret it as learn to read, but if you pay the parents, talk to your kids, sing to your kids, play with your kids, which are pre-literacy skills, then they can really engage as parents the way we wanted to. If we didn't really focus on culturally specific organizations, we wouldn't have learned from them what works best for their kids. There also were many organizations, quite honestly, who have made a difference for our kids in a way we haven't, like NAIA or Self-Enhancement Inc. So I do think within this proposal there's a lot of opportunity for creativity and innovation. I think the other thing I would say is really the majority, about 4 or 5 staff, 4 staff at OEIB of our small staff is about research and policy. So over the years, we have discovered through our university partners that there's practices that work and there's practices that don't. And it seems like we can't just ignore that. So I think the trick is how do we give some guidelines, some sidebars, but don't make it so prescriptive that people don't feel like they have the ability to be creative. Another example, particularly because I know people support RTI, but what we're finding with RTI is kids who are behind, who generally are more kids of color, then they're pulled out of everything like science and social studies, art, to get more reading during the school day, which means they have less time to interact socially with the other kids. So when we're talking about summer school and after school, we're doing that, and so that we know those are places kids can get the extra help in reading, the extra help in math, so they're not missing all of the other important curriculum that makes a balanced curriculum. I'm really fearful when we pull kids out of all those other things, people begin to think because you lack skills, you don't have the potential, where there's kids who can really perform well in science, social studies, as they work to get their skill level up. So I'm really saying let's have some sidebars. I don't think we've given so many that people still can't be creative.
Thanks, Nancy. And is there any other member of either committee who's on the phone that has a comment that we've not invited to speak yet? Okay.
That covers a lot of items that we're talking about.
Julia?
So I just have another comment on third grade reading on the full day kindergarten, just in terms of equity, and I'll just speak from my experience as a Portland Public School parent and formerly on the board, is that is potentially a huge equity issue because I don't know about other districts in the state, but at least for 9% of the kids in the state, parents can buy a full day of kindergarten in most schools. and those parents who can't buy it, their kids get half day. So, you know, for the state to make an investment, I think that would have huge equity, potential positive equity impacts.
Thank you. Pam?
I had two questions, I think, for Rob, and the first one follows on what Julia just said. Question one, could you talk a little bit about how this proposal relates to the full day K proposal? I'm going to say a reference in here, but we weren't able to get into it when you guys came. The second question, I'm confused about whether or not this is focused on K3 or pre-K3, or kind of how you see it connecting with the early learning stuff that comes later. We had a little bit of conversation about that.
So certainly the program needs to be pre-K3, and it needs to be really thoughtful about certainly the way that handoff takes place as well. I think that we fleshed it out better probably honestly from K forward, but there's a lot of discussion too about the early childhood part and how the handoff happens. As far as kindergarten is concerned, full-day kindergarten, the way that we've talked about this proposal is that full-day kindergarten is a component of it. We really believe that if we're going to have students read by the end of third grade, that it takes full-day kindergarten to cause that to happen as a significant component of that. And so we've made it into one large program as opposed to separating those two things out, that full-day kindergarten would be a part of that implementation. And that with that full-day kindergarten, the expectation is that you have a real literacy focus. The thought that we're going to add instructional time in this state for the first time since 1982, and that we're going to get just another half day of kindergarten, doesn't work. If you have a kindergarten that's not well focused and isn't performing at a level that you'd really like to see and doesn't have time at this point to really to give the kind of focus that it takes to get students to be a reader, and you're just going to double up on that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So the thing about the reading initiative is it gets really specific about there needs to be a set aside of instructional time, there needs to be an expectation about remediation for students that are underperforming at the time this is within the school day component. And that if we're going to implement the second half of kindergarten, it needs to be high quality and focused on literacy. And there's lots of people who get concerned about age and level appropriateness. I would say that you can teach literacy with lots of joy in kindergarten in a whole day. So we need to make sure that we focus on joyful learning as well. And we're talking about that. But if we're really going to get to the kind of outcomes that we're anticipating that we could achieve with this reading initiative, which would be 90 to 95% of all third graders reading at grade level, it takes full day kindergarten. You cannot say we're just going to implement this literacy component and get to that level and not have full day kindergarten.
Follow-up?
Yep.
Follow-up question and then a comment. So the way this reads to me, and I just want to confirm that this is correct, the way this reads to me is that this literacy package would be available only to those districts who implement full day K.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
That's how they're sort of companion pieces? Okay. And then my comment is, I guess for the committee, when we get to our work session, I think that's the right way to do this, there either is efficiency or coordination that we need to talk about related between this package and the package later on. I don't even remember what it's called. I should know that, and I don't. The package later on around the early kindergarten system support. So
Yes.
I don't know if it's efficiency, I don't know if it's coordination, I don't know if it's both, but we need to talk about that. Great. So I'm going to flag that, please.
Great. So I'm going to encourage us to move on. We have till 10:30 today. We will end on time. I think Dick and I were happy that this one took such a long period of time because it's a large investment and it's a great practice, but we are going to get quicker as we move through the next 8. And so I would encourage us to move on to the next 8. I think the other piece that might be helpful for Rob and Whitney and Danielle to discuss, or might be a continuing theme throughout, is really while OEIB has this perspective on tight-loose, how we handle it when districts are not performing and how tight-loose interplays with that, particularly I think for the equity committee, as we have talked about achievement compacts and different things and wanting to be tight and loose, and then we have districts who chronically underperform and are unable to achieve with students of color, and how that is handled, which is I think a maybe a big
Welcome
question
to
for.
the Bloodborne Pathogens Awareness Refresher Course for school staff.
Nicole, I have a follow-up on third grade.
Oh, okay, then we'll take one, so
Okay.
I'll let you ponder that kind of question as we move through. I'll invite Hannah to make the last comment about third grade reading, and then we'll move on to the next.
So just one, I really appreciated Nancy's comments about being able to differentiate, because you can't use one reading program for all students. It just doesn't work. Does not work. So I appreciate that we have to be able to differentiate the instruction. But I'm looking at the 95% number that you have in 4 years. And I'm just wondering, with all of the other impacts on our students, do you really believe that this investment alone is going to get 95% of our students to read when we have the absentee issues, we have all the other, how do you get it at 95% if we just make this investment?
Fair question. I'm basing that, first of all, I would never say, I didn't say we can hit 95%. I hope what I said that we can approach it. And basically basing that on districts who have implemented these kinds of robust programs in other places and achieved that kind of outcome with students that are representative of students in the state. Districts have achieved those levels, and they've done it with programs that are not quite as robust as this one is designed, but they've done it with full-day kindergarten, intensive literacy initiative, and additional supports for students, and outreach to the community. And
Okay,
they
so
have
all of those
districts
things
that
are
are
part of
representative
the
of other districts, yes. I would say though that that it would be hard to find a district that has implemented a program as robust as this one is currently designed.
This is Nancy. You know, another thing that I think is really important, we've talked a lot about this, the OSBA, the OEIB, the COSA, to all, TPA, all of our partners. So the belief is that once we get going on this, we're going to really call on our partners to really help us. So if the Oregon school boards could be suggesting to boards that they set a goal around third grade reading, if OEA will help us work with our teachers about the importance of this. I think it's not, if we use culturally specific practices with parents that really get them more engaged, I really think we can multiply our efforts in a way that we're going to come very close to that target.
Thank you. Thank you for that good discussion. And I just got news from Whitney that we don't have to get through every single one. We will not. We do have other additional time, but we should strive to do our best. So if someone could lead us through just a little summary on the ELL funding, and then we can have a conversation about that, that'd be great. A couple sentences, get us started, Rob.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Yes, I know what's in it. So basically, this proposal would adjust the ADMW dollar amount for ELL students from 1.5 to 1.6, so just 1/10. Would give a little more additional resource. The district would receive the additional weight, the additional 0.6, if you will, for students that are initially identified as being a level 1 or level 2 by the English language proficiency assessment. So that means that the student is has very little English skill, that they would receive that weight for 7 years, regardless of the length of time that it took for the student to exit ELL status. So if they could do it in a year, they still get the extra 0.7 or 0.6 for the full 7 years. If it takes them 9 years, you have to support the student in ELL without additional resource for 2. If a student was a level 3 or a level 4, which is a higher level on the English language proficiency assessment, the district would receive the resource for 4 years. Districts are required to spend a minimum of 90% of the extra weight on ELLs. Currently, the formula doesn't have any expectation about the resource being spent, so the 0.5 can be spent on anything the district chooses as opposed to it being an allocation for a purpose. And the district receives an additional $250 incentive whenever ELL student graduates with a diploma. So the student doesn't have to be ELL at the time of graduation, They just need to have been an ELL student at some point in time in their career. There's an extra $250 from wherever that student graduates.
So if you're, I'm making it up, you're ELL in Beaverton and you graduate from David Douglas High School or the district gets
It's the $250, yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about, do you think the $250 or this additional weight will inspire districts to do things differently with students? I mean, I think there's a built-in assumption that more money will make them do something different, and I'm not sure I'm with you on that leap.
Yeah. So there are a couple different pieces. One thing that we know at this point in time is that when students do exit ELL, especially before they get to high school, they're much more likely to graduate than any other students, any other demographic breakout that we can do. So if an ELL student exits ELL prior to 9th grade, they're more likely to graduate from high school in a 4-year cohort than any other demographic, including white, Asian, you name it, are more likely to graduate from high school in a 4-year cohort. So that's one component, is making sure the students exit in a timely fashion and that they are able to accomplish that. The other is that once a student exits ELL status, we don't want districts to take their eye off of the prize, which is to have them graduate, right? And so if there is some additional resource, I think there is opportunity for additional supports. Example, there are districts who have hired family advocates for students of color. And if those family advocates spend extra time with students who are in high school or students of color, ensuring that they're signing up for the right classes, that when they're able, that they're signing up for AP and IB, that they are getting support about what their next steps look like, that they understand the credits that they need to earn to graduate from high school, and those cost dollars, and that when districts make those efforts, that those students are much more likely to graduate on time and to graduate enroll. And that $250 really gives them the resource to make those kinds of hires with the expectation that's going to make a difference in graduation rates.
Other questions?
Yeah, I want to support the adjustments. I feel like it's an area that we've been advocating in the community I worked with for many years. Although I think we can go a lot further, we should go a lot further. This is the first step, so I'm willing to take that leap and support this. I do think that it's really going to be important for us to develop those community relationships with those organizations that are working with parents, that are working with students. I in particular work with the Capacis Leadership Institute in Woodburn that is developing a program that's bringing in youth, especially from the 4 high schools that exist in Woodburn to sort of build their capacity, their leadership development, and trying to get them to go to college. And this would be, I think, really helpful for us. I do think that one concern I do have is the question that Nicole raised, is that the incentive, and is the incentive enough, right? Is it the right number? And I don't have enough information. And actually, what I'm going to do is go back to my community partners to have a discussion on that. And would you be willing to accept recommendations in writing from me once I do that?
Absolutely.
Okay. The other question I had was the effects that this is going to have on school districts that are not complying. Our intentions all along were not to. We have problems with the formula that exists right now. We think that school districts are using the money they're getting, especially from the federal government, to sort of like patch up their budget deficits, right? And that's a different issue, and that we can't address here. But nevertheless, I think that to me, it sends a strong message to those school districts that we're concerned about this. And so the incentive piece, I'm not really sure that it's enough, but I'm willing to go with it because it's something. But I'll go back to the community and get some responses from you. So I wanna be supportive.
Yeah, that's
So,
great.
just for clarification, I'm not sure I said this well, but the $250 incentive, it's not that I somehow think that because the district's going to get $250 that they're going to make money. You know, that, hey, we have something we can make money. The idea of this is, what would it cost you to support students to ensure that they're more likely to graduate? What kind of a program could you design, and what do those programs cost? So I've talked to districts about what do you do? You've been successful in getting ELLs to graduate. What do you do differently? What are you spending your money on? And they can identify a program. I think about, you know, what I did as a superintendent in order to try to incent that, or in order to try to cause that to happen, and how much it cost. So if there is, and then it worked. So if that's what it costs, and it costs about $250 a student to do it, then let's give the district the money up front so that they engage in that program, in that effort, and that the students are delivered something so that they're more likely to graduate. It isn't that somehow now the district says, oh, they graduate, we got some free money to do something else with. It's that they've invested to cause that to happen.
Great.
Yeah, and my concern as a follow-up is that that's not been the practice with the federal money that's coming in. So we need to make sure that we hold them accountable, that they don't use the money, you know, to do patchwork, but they're actually investing it in the student themselves.
Yeah, I think that the question I was trying to ask earlier, you articulated it much better than I was able to, so thanks. I think we have Julia and then Samuel for a comment.
So I just have a series of questions, and this may not be, you can answer whatever you want, or maybe they're just for the future discussion, but, and this may have already been covered, but how much specifically is the weight going to be increased? Is it an additive weight, or is it same amount of money, we're just redistributing it around, because then it'd be what the opportunity cost is of how you're redistributing it. I'd be interested in the standard of 90% of the extra weight on ELL services, to know currently what we think the percentage of districts or schools are using it on ELL services versus non-ELL services. So if we're going to require 90%, what is it now? Again, are we going from 85 to 90, or is it, you know, a huge number currently? And then I would say, the way this is worded, you have it's the extra weight the 90% requires. Why wouldn't we do it for the entire weight? And then the last piece, just on the bonus, I'm wondering if there's something in addition to the monetary, because I'm not sure the monetary is the right incentive. It may, but also seeing how behavior works, maybe not. It gets disconnected of how you really shine a light on those districts that are successfully helping students in a positive way. So it's not just you got a check because you did a good job, but really here's what I guess this is more sort of the setting the high standard and shining a spotlight on those districts that are just knocking it out of the park, in addition to the money, which I know is needed.
Dr. Henry?
Thank you. Let me lead out and say I think this is the highest priority, especially for the Equity and Partnership Subcommittee. Let me suggest that we might increase that to $500 to show we're serious. Let me suggest that we need to signal, as my colleague has already said, a policy emphasis here, and a policy shift. And I think it's really important to, when you signify that, to put something behind it. I think it's much more than money, though, and I think a lot of my colleagues have spoken to that. I think it serves to actively discourage the detour of federal funds. And I think at this point, our state needs to say we are really serious about the education of students whose first language is not English. And I believe that one of the ways to do that is to put this on the top.
Thank you. Duncan?
So I concur with Samuel. This is a huge priority in my mind. for the equity lens and for the state. This is a population, if we don't serve well, we're going to be in deep trouble down the road. Again, like the first one, I totally support the concept. I think we really should spend time on the design. And in particular, the 90% is problematic in the context of the funding formula in general. Accounting for the 90% is going to be a nightmare. Frankly, how do you do a dual immersion accounting? I mean, so, if you've got one of the best practices in early years is having a full dual immersion. I don't know what those how do you even allocate the cost of what Woodburn does, for example. So I think the key is to have, again, a time, the idea of having a certain amount of time with a certain amount of money, and again, measuring very clearly the results. Our students meeting, we have a pretty good assessment with the ELPA on meeting the goals in English literacy while maintaining the native language. I think we're really clear on the goal. We can do this quite well. And I love the idea of the high school completion. I'll come back to that. I think we should do more on the high school completion and college going, but I'll hold up on that for a minute. But again, I think like the first, absolutely the right area. We should spend the time to design it so when we get to the legislature, it's foolproof and really thought through. I've already heard some pushback on the 90% for the reasons I've described. I think it's pretty tricky, but we should not do this because of the details, so let's figure out the details.
Great. Any other comments? Great. Yeah.
So I know through my entire career, we've been working on this in Beaverton, trying to make sure that the funds actually go where the funds are supposed to go. And districts sometimes don't make that decision because sometimes the parents who come and push things at the school board are not the parents who would be pushing to ensure that our students all have access. But I really struggle with the incentive. I really, you're going to give me $250 and you think I'm going to work a little harder with students. I think we should talk about how we ensure that all students have access to those programs and the supports that they need versus saying I'll give you a little more money if you get this diploma out of the student. I think it sets us up for a lot of things that cause trouble in education. I'm a proponent for us providing that quality, well-rounded education for every student, and that means with our ELL students that we need to invest in them and we need to ensure that at each level they have the support that they need to be successful. I haven't seen where an incentive works in schools.
So just to ask a clarifying question, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're supportive of getting additional resources to sort of fund the types of things that Rob discussed, but putting it in an incentive format triggers challenges and experiences you've had.
Yeah, I just don't see that working, but I think we should. We should be. When money is sent to a district to be used for our ELL students, it should be used for our ELL students. And I know there are districts that were below 60% of what they should be spending, and we need to make sure that we help them understand that's not appropriate and we're not going to allow it to happen. And then we should be providing them with the best practice so that they can invest in those things that are making a difference for students. So where we're successful, share that out. I think that's one of our hopes through the OEIB is that we would find best practice and allow people to have professional development around that and invest in those school districts.
Great. Rob?
Rob, I like this proposal, the comment made, but when you talked about you give them 7 years money or 4 years money or whatever, and they're motivated if they can have the kid on track. Sooner than that, they've got money to use for other education. That's all wonderful. But the district that doesn't, you give them 7 years money or 4 years money, and after 7 years or 4 years, the kid isn't where they need to be. And so you can say, well, the district has to still keep working on those kids, but they don't get any extra money for it. I'm skeptical that the district that had 4 years or 7 years of extra money and failed to get the kid on track is going to get them on track in year 8 or 5 or whatever without the money. So what's the thought about what you do with the people who, I happen to think incentives do work, but they're not going to work for everybody. And so in the districts where it doesn't work, what do we do?
Right. I don't know that I have a great answer. What I would tell you is that, there's a real debate about around ELL in particular, about how long does it take to exit a program from ELL? How long does it take for a student to acquire an English language skill that's sufficient to be successful in school? Most people would say it takes about 7 years to acquire academic content, or academic skill in English language. So that's why we've put 7 years for those students that are level 1 or level 2, is because there's some research that indicates that that's about the right amount of time. We also want to make sure that we have 7 years so that if districts decide to use dual language programs, which typically is a slower English language acquisition pathway, but also probably has the most robust, positive long-term outcomes of any program that we can develop, that there's enough money within this system to allow districts to implement that kind of a model, because we want to encourage that sort of model. Some students in any district are going to exit prior to 7 years, and some students in any district are going to take longer than 7 years. It would be my hope that, you know, there would be some wash within that as districts focus on this and work extra diligently with some additional resources in .6 as opposed to .5 to help students exit by the end of 7 years, and that if you get a student to exit in 5, that there's an offset for a student that takes 9.
Right, and I think that's great for the district that's doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be some districts that don't, and you need to have in mind what are you doing about them.
So I'm going to move us along. This is one small comment that I will add, which is actually from my co-chair here. Just in general, the way that the language we're using to describe this initiative is not necessarily strength-based, and it's not necessarily in line with the equity lens, which refers to viewing children who speak multiple languages as a strength and an asset. And particularly if we have all of the data that supports that students who are served well in ELL are actually our students with the best opportunity to graduate and actually are performing, which I think most people don't know that in education in our state. I just think our language should reflect the strength of this proposal and the strength of our students, and the way it's worded kind of infers that they might be a burden as opposed to the best opportunity. So that would be...
If I could say too, from Rob, you're from a pretty athletic family, increases weight per student. I don't know if that's a good idea or not.
Only wrestling below your weight limit.
And Sam endorsing that's really a disappointment.
It does depend on your sport, for sure. If you're a biker, not a good deal.
Just a quick technical response to something Julia said. That's an error to say require district to use 90% of extra weight. It's of the weight.
Of the entire.
Yes,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Okay,
That's good. That's good. Great. Okay, bonus for 9th grade on track. I'm not going to invite a preamble. I'm just going to invite us to go straight to conversation, unless you really want a preamble. Okay. Thoughts, comments, questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So it sounds to me like the incentive payment is triggered by two things. It's triggered by meeting the 9th grade benchmark. It's also triggered by providing programs. So I can get some of this incentive if I just provide a program, regardless of the outcome of that program. And I also get incentive if I meet the benchmark. I was trying to figure out the interplay between the two. Can you explain?
You have to do both. So you have to both offer the program, and the student has to achieve 6 credits by the end of 9th grade, which includes summer school before 9th and summer school after 9th.
Okay.
In order to earn the $290 student bonus, or student bonus. And so that's component 1. And if the student attends 90% of the days, there's an additional $50 per student. So in order to get any money, you have to offer both the program, and the student has to achieve 6 outcomes. That's a bonus of $290. If the student also attends at least 90% of the days, there's another bonus of $50.
And I apologize for the places where my
That's okay, I just need, that's all right, I just need to.
This is some of the
That's
details.
helpful.
And again, it's not about anybody working harder. It's about having the resource to offer more. So it's being able to afford this $290 is the dollars that would be necessary to offer the kind of summer school and after-school supports that are written into the program, with that kind of a resource on a per-student basis, you should be able to offer those programs. So it's about offering more so that you can get that outcome. The student at the end of ninth grade, traditional ninth grade in June, is at 5.5 credits. I'm hoping people are going to work really hard over the course of that summer before they enter 10th grade with these kinds of summer programs, because they will have the dollars to offer those programs in order to be able to do that.
Hannah, and just to clarify, so you're using incentive, but it sounds like it's more of an enhancement than an incentive tied to outcomes. I mean,
I would hope there's no such thing really, I think, as an incentive for a school district in its truest sense. It's not like you get $290 so you put it in your pocket and walk home, right? That seems like an incentive to me. It is that we want a certain kind of outcome, but we don't have enough money to cause that outcome. If you give us $290 a student, we'll design a summer school program and an after-school program that make it more likely that a student will earn 6 credits, because we are going to have the money to do that, and therefore we can actually accomplish it, and so we can afford to offer more.
okay. Sorry, I'm just getting confused. Hannah, I'm sorry to.
So you want the districts to reach the benchmark, and then you're going to give them the money. So in order for you to get the 290, you have to reach the benchmark. Is that right?
So technically, if we were going to do this, what we would do is ask a district to predict the percentage of students that would receive 6 credits at the end of the year. This is in the first year of implementation. We give them the money up front so that they can offer the program. Then they tell us how many really got the 6 credits, and then we do an adjustment in May, just like we do all kinds of financial adjustments. And the district just needs to make a decent prediction, and that typically those adjustments are not significant. There's all kinds of programs that we run like that in the state, where we ask them to make a prediction: how many students are you going to have, how many are going to be being reduced, how many are going to, all kinds of things. We give them the money up front so they can offer the program, then we make an adjustment in the following May. So that's how this program would run as well, on just sort of a technical basis.
Julia?
So if they don't hit the mark, then they're going to lose money the next year. Instead of us saying that we believe this is important and we're going to invest in this, we're going to put the dollars in, we're saying, you tell us what you're going to do. And I'm struggling with this a little bit, because smaller districts who maybe don't have the manpower to create all these graphs and charts to show you what they can do. And I don't, maybe it's nothing other than telling you, we're going to hit this mark, and you give them the money. But it really, I continue to struggle with this idea that we don't acknowledge we need to invest more, and we should be doing that. And I'd like ODE to stand up and say, we need this in order for our students to be successful, is my hope.
Thank you.
So I had a question about the on-track benchmark and what they are, and whether it's just a pure 6 credits. And this is sort of a consistent concern I have about how we're setting the benchmark, because this issue of check, we got them through 9th grade with 6 credits, they graduated with the required number of credits, and yet when they, for example, 60% of the kids from Portland Public Schools who go to PCC are having to take remedial classes. So in that case, it's like, what value were those 6 credits? So I'm curious whether there's something more than the 6 credits, or it's like you could just barely be passing those, not have mastered the topic, and you still have met the benchmark and you get the money, or whether it's something higher.
Are you trying to bait me into talking about the Common Core?
No, I'm feeling for those students who graduate with a diploma and think that they did everything, their school got rewarded because they got those 6 credits, they got their diploma, and then they find out that they're having to pay for classes at PCC or community college that don't move them forward.
So I was being slightly flip, but I think that that there are 2 different components here. One is, there's a lot of research that says when students are on track with 6 credits, they're going to graduate. As a freshman, they are going to graduate from high school. I mean, there's all kinds of research about that. Now, when we start talking about whether or not students are going to take remedial courses when they get to a community college, to me it really is about content and essential skills. So we have 2 things that we're doing now in the state. One of them is we're changing the content that we expect students to learn by adopting because we adopted a new set of standards called the Common Core. And that the Common Core really has an expectation that's different than we've ever had in the state of Oregon before. That we're going to teach a content level that will have students graduate college and career ready. The other thing that we have in Oregon is demonstration of essential skills. You have to demonstrate at a certain level that you're competent in writing, math, and reading. This last year's graduating class is the first class that's ever had to demonstrate that. And that when you are taught to that college and career outcome, and you have those 3 essential skills, you're much less likely to need to take remedial courses when you get to high school. But if you're going to graduate, you need to earn 6 credits as a freshman. The next greatest predictor of success in the state of Oregon is attendance. And when we look at almost when we do any kind of regression analysis of what is most predictive of students graduating, it is what percent of the time did they attend as a 9th grader in high school. And if you attend 90%, there is a 72% likelihood that you'll graduate from high school. If you attend 90%, if you attend like 98%, there's about a 92% chance right now that you'll graduate from high school. If you attend 85% of the time, there's a 50% likelihood you'll graduate from high school. And therefore, we have within this not just the 6th grade credit earning, but also a bonus for attendance.
I guess, can I just provide one that partially answers it, but I guess, well, there used to be the 40, 40, 20 up here, but the whole notion of a diploma, so 6 credits to get a diploma, I guess what I'm saying is I think it's, to get to the 40-40, they're gonna need more than just the diploma with Cs. And so, yes, maybe 6 credits does predict that you're gonna get a diploma, but is it a diploma that gives you the ticket 40 and 40?
I bet Mr. Hannon would like us to get to his proposals soon so that he can tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the question's really good, and it points to the need, in some cases, to think about these as a package, because, go ahead, Duncan. I think it's a story to tell, and it's not one, we don't think any one thing is gonna do it, and so when you think about it, the 9th grade on track is just one small piece of it, and you're talking about then how do we connect it into the post-secondary, ensure that students are able to achieve that, and I think it's about a package of investments that's gonna move us to 40, 40, 20, rather than a singular attempt.
Okay, if we could have Duncan's comment, and I do want to move us forward, and I know Duncan and Dick, you both had a comment, and I also want to sort of check the temperature, because there was resounding support for the first 2 we talked about, and so far there's just been clarifying questions about this number 3, so if folks have opinions also about it as far as a priority, that would be wonderful to share as well.
I like this, but I now would be suggesting, I think it needs to be more context. I think the goal needs to be the following. That every student leaving middle school should understand that if they achieve the high school diploma, with whatever changes you want to make in the essential skills, but remember, and I stress this, Julia, the essential skills we set were college ready in English, writing, and math, as the higher ed system told us at the time on the board. So please take the essential skills test and understand what they are. They're not, this is a pretty challenging test, and I think we have not said enough about how proud we should be about this graduating class that met the 3 essential skills. I mean, it's a big deal. That just happened in Oregon. And I think it should affect the remediation if it's, it really should. So I think the point of, pride for the state. But so what I would say is we need a set of strategies that help students understand that if they achieve the high school diploma, which means you need to work hard freshman year, we are going to give you an opportunity to go to college. And that will tie to Ben's proposals where we say we're going to have the Oregon Opportunity Grant plus the support for the higher ed system so that everyone, regardless of income or race or ethnicity, will be able to go to college if you meet the diploma. Which then I would argue for some kind of additional payment for high school students graduating with the new diploma and enrolled in higher ed and have filled out their financial aid forms. If we could create a strong incentive and the programs to deliver that, we would then have the pathway for Ben to get all those students ready for college, and then we'll take it from there at the heck. So I think there's a thematic here, starting at freshman year all the way through into college, that would be a very powerful new signal for high school students to get on to the next stage.
Okay.
Rob, you said that attendance was a big indicator. How does our state rank with days in school compared to other states and the completion?
Our days in schools are some of the lowest in the nation.
And what's that, how's that for completion then on the 12th grade, or is that?
So the data that I was talking about is not about how many days we have, it's about the percentages of time that a student attends and the days that we do offer. And those are kind of two different things.
Oh, okay.
I would have to do a little bit of research about the other part.
Okay, great. So we have a very robust list of public testimony, and we need to save space for that. So I'm actually going to propose that we skip number 4 and go on to the early years to kindergarten system and service, because we've been completely on ODE today, and I want to give some of the other areas some time and attention. So if we will talk about that when we come back together again. So early years to kindergarten system and service, providing funding through Early Learning Hub system to support stable and attached families, kindergarten readiness, and family engagement and early literacy. Questions, thoughts, perspectives? I mean, the only question so would this be more resources to the hubs? And then I think that the chronic question that we have had about the hubs is really the concern that many of the hubs' leadership, staff, and governance do not reflect the very children that are being served. So that, as an OEIB board member, that is the #1 question and concern I receive in every community I visit, from our most diverse communities to our least diverse communities. And so I'm just, the implementation about that, I think, is the question I would have.
I would second that.
So I can respond to some of that. So this is a package from the department that provides continued support to the early learning hub and coordination system that we're setting up. So it's a continuation and an addition, I think, to the work that's already been set up and that is legislatively mandated in terms of how we coordinate services. I agree with the weakness that you identified. I think that's spot on. We have an equity committee of our own that is working right now, and some of you are members of that, that's working right now to create a toolkit, an actionable toolkit to provide technical assistance and hands-on tools to hubs to address the equity lens, including some of the issues that you talked about, but many more than that. So we can provide more information. Danny sits on it, others sit on it, provide more information.
And I really would love to hear some examples of how things are going in the early learning hubs, because I don't have any background in that, and I think it would help me understand better what we're doing if we had some, maybe even just some videos from some of them to show what's going on, so we could take a look at them outside of our meeting time or whatever. But I feel like it's happening in a more direction.
I won't do that today in the interest of time, but we can just some snippets.
So it sounds like your answer, Pam, is that there's sort of intent to improve, but fundamentally we are just giving more resources to the system as it is, and hopefully they'll do some equity toolkits and get better at this, or hire more diverse staff, or...
Yes, there is intent, but I would say that it's much more than intent. We actually are trying to make this actionable in a very real way. So what I would do is remind everybody that we are very early on. We only have...
Nancy, I think you're the one who has your mic on, and we're hearing more than we need to hear.
So we're very early on in this process. We established 6 hubs. We provisionally established a few more that are in the process of coming up to standard on a variety of things, including equity issues. And we have new staff coming on board. We have a package of technical assistance that we're putting together on this issue, and we're creating a toolkit which takes the equity lens from the OEIB and makes it actionable for those communities. So yes, there's intent, but I think we're doing much more than having intent. I actually think that I'm pretty proud of the work that the Early Learning Council is doing on the equity lens and in establishing and drilling that into the hubs. But I think Janet wanted to add to that.
I would just add that in both rounds that we've had so far, feedback, if a hub area submitted basically a replication of what they're already doing, they were turned down. And even in this past round, people were given specific directives that, of how they needed to modify their proposal. So I agree with Pam, I think it's early on, but there is a definite feeling that we cannot keep doing things that we've been doing. We have to address the communities as they exist now.
Thank you. Other questions or thoughts before we?
So just what information would be helpful? Again, I think to Hannah's point, just trying to conceptualize what it is. So more information on that. And then the standard question I had about everything else, like number of students served, maybe disaggregated information about the students, like who exactly it is. So if this is an incremental add, how many students is it impacting and to what magnitude, new types of students?
I'd just like to reframe, instead of you making a video, invite me out to
Yeah,
some,
absolutely.
tell us where we can go to really see what's going on.
I wanted the video so that I could peek over her shoulder and look and see.
I'll go do the
But
video.
you'll do the video, okay.
We're gonna take, Hannah's gonna be the videographer.
Okay.
Okay.
The only other is there, I know we have the kindergarten readiness, right?
Yes.
And so how would that, all this investment ties in what you anticipate in terms of performance? I mean, and maybe, but not now, I mean, I just haven't spent enough time on
Okay.
that and making sure I understand.
Okay, so that's a flag for our work session.
Yeah.
Yes, got it.
Can we move into quality early childcare? See if folks have thoughts, perspectives, additional questions.
So I have a question about this, and having served, back when I was a heavy consumer of childcare, having served on the Oregon Child Care Commission at one point, knowing that the issue of child care providers was, and the type of training or lack of that they had was important. But I guess I look at this and I see it more as an, it used to be in the employment department, and somehow this, I'm trying to see how this directly, long-term has a substantial impact on, I say this isn't speaking to the at all to the not valuing it, but if we're going for the highest impacts or return on investments, I just would say I think this is somewhat far removed from, these aren't teachers or instructors, most child care providers, that's not their background. So I just.
Right. And I love the question, I think, that's also in the equity analysis that Shondine wrote is really important as well. I think this one actually presents the greatest risk to potentially create further disparities, and since, you know, only 10% of our kids are in Head Start and 90% of the other kids are in informal or this, it's a really important area, but I do think that this analysis of the equity challenges and potential increase in disparities is a very real concern.
So can I respond to both very briefly? So, Julia, the move of the child care division out of the employment department and into the early learning division was an intentional policy shift that the legislature and the governor made to say that, you know, once upon a time, we viewed child care in Oregon as a support to working parents. And it is a support to working parents, but it's where the vast majority of our kids are. Before they show up at a school door, they're either in a healthcare system somewhere, they show up, 90-some% of them do, or 2/3 of them show up in a child care setting. So we're missing a huge opportunity, a huge early learning opportunity, if we don't do something about quality early learning environments. So the rating system, so we're creating a rating system, which is like a 5-star, you know, if you think about it, like you're going to go to a dinner or at a 5-star restaurant or a 3-star restaurant or a hotel. So it's going to be it's a very transparent system that at its different levels will illustrate and require different sort of quality and learning environments. And so you as a consumer of child care would be able to see what level of learning environment your child is getting in setting A versus setting B. So I actually disagree. I think this is a huge piece of our early learning work. And if we don't do it, we're missing a big opportunity to up the quality of providers that are caring for 2/3 of our kids.
Well, I think it probably merits a much deeper discussion, but I think the economics of childcare and the number of kids that, and if you look at children who are in sort of more unstructured
Right.
environment, especially in rural areas, that for the economics to work, the childcare provider has to be paid less than the parent, because otherwise you're paying to work. And that, I'm not sure you're going to, the economics are gonna work, so.
This does not address the economics, it just addresses the quality issue. We could have a week-long conversation, as you know, about the economics around childcare and what a huge problem in the state. So I
Right.
agree.
But-
I do want to address your
Yeah.
piece, Nicole. Actually, what you addressed and what whoever put this together did is actually my biggest worry about this. And I have a suggestion. So it's actually my biggest worry that as we're out increasing the ratings and increasing the quality of childcare settings around the state, my biggest worry is that we're missing where our kids of color are, because it's quite frankly easier in our existing systems if you're a white stay-at-home mom who wants to get registered to be a childcare provider to get your way through this system. So we have, through another, not here, but through an existing program, a series of childcare resource and referrals. I think investment committee members, when we get to our work session, I would like us to consider making a mandatory part of this package that we redeploy our existing resources to focus on those communities that we may miss as part of all of this, or may underserve as part of all of this. So it shouldn't just be an ad, it should be also a redeploy of how we're thinking about, to be doing business differently. So
Yeah, I mean, seeing this firsthand in my neighborhood, we have an organization that is in the quality ranking, and since becoming a 3-star organization, they've gone from being 40% children of color to 0% children of color, and their price has gone up 40%.
Yeah.
What a wonderful outcome in North Portland.
Right, so
That's a problem.
I would like us to make a mandatory part of this package, redeploying our existing resources to focus on those areas.
Okay, so will those amendments be made before the August 21st
I
meeting?
think that's part of our work session, is it not? Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if we can do birth to 3, and then we will go straight to public testimony. Ben and the heck, we are sorry that we didn't get to yours today. What's that?
But that's a problem. That is a problem.
Yeah.
It's a repeated.
Birth to 3.
We're used to it.
They're used to it. The constant oppression of higher ed. And
We'll get back to it.
okay, birth to 3. This is our last one that we will have time to do before we do public testimony. Questions, comments, thoughts, perspectives.
Very, very important.
I like its targeting of rural communities who clearly need a lot of lifting to do with respect to early care.
Who would be doing the home visiting? Would it look different and be different? Like who are the folks doing it in this scenario?
So you're touching, I'm going to get on, I'll do my best to not get on the soapbox. So the Outcomes and Investment Subcommittee members have heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again, I'm going to say it a lot at the work session that we have, that I am a person who worries a lot about just putting more money into a system that we currently have. We do need more money into the system, but we also have to do business differently. We're just going to get more of the same outcomes if we just put more money into the system. So this is an example of where just putting more money, do we need more money in this? Yes. Do we need more investment in it? Yes. Is this probably the most critical age that we could invest in? Absolutely. But if we just put more money into what we have, it's not going to work. This has to come coupled with the courage to do some make some very significant changes in how we fund these. So to your point, Nicole, we have 9 home visiting programs in the state of Oregon. We should not have 9 home visiting programs in the state of Oregon. Because we have families who need stuff and don't get it. We have families who get more than one thing. It needs to be centered around the needs of the particular child and family, and we ought to have the courage to change the way we fund and do business so that if the family needs a formatorist model, they get it. If the family needs a nurse because the child has medical issues, they get it. So this should be coupled with, I know this comes from the division of the policy board that I chair, but this needs to be coupled with changes in our, and I don't know how we do this, changes in how we fund these very programs on the healthcare side, and we need to put them all together.
So is it assumed that those changes would happen if we fund this, or is it like I really?
I certainly hope, so that's my advocacy on the work session, and I just have to say that, I'll get off my soapbox now, but I have to say that in response to your question.
Because I think that's really important for this group to know, because funding more of the same is probably not that exciting to most of us. But we could be in a position where we, those changes are very difficult to make. There's phenomenal advocacy to prevent change in that capacity. So it's sort of, I think the next part of the conversation is the likelihood of those changes happening so that this money could be used effectively. Okay, so wonderful conversation. Thank you, everyone. We have 14 minutes left, and we have 5 folks signed up for public testimony. We invite 1 person from each group to speak. They have a limited time of 3 minutes, and we will be very firm on time limits today. And so our first person that we would love to invite is, I believe, Jeff Laff from PCC, and it looks like we have 2 people signed up from PCC, so if Jeff and Adam could, are you speaking to the same issue, or?
Sure.
Okay, then maybe decide amongst yourself on who will represent PCC today, because we have 1 person per organization.
Have Adam.
Great. Welcome. This is Adam Clark on behalf of PCC.
So my name's Adam Clark, as you've said. I work for Portland Community College as a student support specialist with the Links department. So as a daily part of my job, I get the pleasure and privilege to work with the Yes to College program. And I wouldn't be here today to talk to you guys if it weren't for my enrolling in the Yes to College program about 8 years ago today. I would have never dreamed to be able to sit in front of you. I barely could have envisioned completing my GED at all. I grew up poor. I grew up doing poorly in school. One of 3 children to a single mother who was battling terminal cancer throughout my youth. I was distracted. I was disengaged. Education wasn't for me. I couldn't find a place that was for me in my life that I was going through at that time. During my high school career, I was kicked out of no less than 5 high schools across 2 districts. Some of that was due to not being able to attend classes for several reasons. So I dropped out. I effectively became a dropout. When I left high school, I never thought I'd finish high school at all, let alone go on to college, let alone come to sit in front of you guys today. I spent more time in a courtroom than I did in the classroom, so a board like you guys today, instead of across town at the Justice Center in front of a different board, is not where I expected to find myself today. But luckily for me, I found an option that worked for me. I found a doorway that allowed me to complete high school. It allowed me to do that quickly. I didn't have to do that in a high school environment that didn't fit my life. And it was a godsend for me, really. It felt like that program was created just for me, specific to the challenges and obstacles to success that I've had in my life. And so, because of the caring, capable, and creative staff at Yes to College, they are the catalyst for the success that I've had today. Today I get to work with those same students that I was, 8 years ago. So I'm a proud GED recipient, the only one in my family. Everyone else has earned a high school diploma, but I'm also the first person to graduate from college. So I just think that speaks to the importance of what you guys are talking about here, all the different aspects. And so a program like Yes to College sent me from disengaged and despondent about education with positive and passionate, and that's my life now. I try and meld my passion and my experience to work with these students.
Thank you so much. Can we invite Nick Mathern from the Gateway to College Natural Network to speak, please?
Ben, I'll give you your chair back if you like.
That's a great. Just to clarify, was the other person from PCC a student or a faculty on behalf of PCC?
Staff.
Staff. Okay, great. If you were a student, we would totally let you testify. But next time. Great.
Good morning, and thanks very much for hearing my testimony. I will be very brief, but I want to also testify briefly about the considerations and recommendations that these joint committees are taking up around the GED. I participate as a member of the coalition of advocates that the City College of Portland formed last year as a result of a study that they did, and as a national organization that works with young people who have left high school without a diploma, Gateway to College National Network is very interested in doing everything we can to make sure both that the young people who leave high school without a diploma have an opportunity both to come back and finish a high school credential, but also have real access to post-secondary opportunities, and that's really what we're all about. A couple of just quick points I'll bring up. One is that when we're looking at GEDs, one of the questions that often comes up is whether or not a GED or other high school equivalency credential is truly equivalent. And there are, I think, a number of ways of looking at this. Certainly the standards for the GED has gotten a lot of attention recently, and with the newly redesigned GED, there's a good question to wonder about whether the GED is in fact equal to or maybe even higher than the high school standards in some cases. However, my concern would be, and I think that the attention we should pay the attention we should give is really to where the outcomes are for GED earners. And historically, we know that GED earners simply don't have the same outcomes. If that is your final degree, these young people earn 15% less than students who have a final degree of a high school credential, or excuse me, a high school diploma. Fortunately, many people who take a GED test do so with the intention of going on to post-secondary. Nearly 3/4 of them intend, 65, some 70% intend to go on to post-secondary. About half of them actually do that. So there's a big drop off there. And then of those that do, a very significant majority, depending on the numbers you look at, anywhere from 50 to 90% of those leave post-secondary within their first semester. And so I think the question is not so much about the standards, but what is it in the process by which we're helping students earn a GED that allows students to finally be successful in post-secondary. So the point really I want to bring home here is that this isn't so much about the standards, it isn't so much about the credential itself, it's about how we support young people to earn a GED and whether GED preparation is really in fact what we want to be doing, or do we want to be doing college and career preparation. We want people who access college with a high school diploma equivalency to have the same opportunities to be successful at college as everyone else. And I think that the answer to that is probably yes. And therefore, I would recommend that as we're looking at the recommendations around the GED, I want to fully welcome and support the recommendations around wraparound student services. Those are critical. But I also want to encourage the committee to consider something even beyond that, which is the idea of a GED plus. GED instruction that is not just about test prep, that is in fact talking about how to integrate students' experience into a post-secondary experience or to career pathways, and have students participating in college coursework and other career preparatory activities while they're working toward earning a GED. I think that that's a critical model that is beginning to pick up momentum around the country. In some communities, individual school districts have been supportive of that. Here in Portland, we're fortunate that Portland Community College and Portland Public Schools are working on exactly such a partnership that Jeff and our colleagues are here to represent today. The state of Washington has got a statewide policy that essentially creates GED plus opportunities for all recovered high school dropouts, and in a few other pockets around the country, there's philanthropic efforts to do this, but I think that would be something that we absolutely increase students' likelihood to be successful in post-secondary here in Oregon.
Great. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we have not got it perfect yet, but I will share that our overarching high school equivalency policy does include that, and all of the language does reference career and college preparedness, and actually some of the details of the proposal do speak quite a bit to exactly what you're talking about, so I'm sure we don't have it perfect yet, but we're on the same track. So,
Thank you.
can we have Maureen Allen from OSBA, the Oregon School Board Association, please? And we are very time conscious, so 2.5 minutes, please.
Good morning, Morgan Allen, here on behalf of the Oregon School Boards Association. Wanted to compliment you on your discussion for the 4 priorities for K-12 today. I think there were a lot of issues I was going to bring up that I don't have to. And we want to extend our compliments to the Department of Ed and Rob Saxon. I think they have done a fantastic job. Our organization is supportive of the 4 elements that were recommended. But we probably won't surprise anyone that we have some comments we'd like to make about the funding related to those. In an attempt to be respectful of your process, I redid my thing and scratched out most of my numbers, and I think I'll only be referring to numbers that have already been discussed or previously discussed. But the first thing on the reading by 3rd grade, the full day kindergarten has already been identified as a huge part of that. And the reality is the legislature made that change with the promise of funding to come. And that funding necessary to make sure that you don't cannibalize all the other funding for special education, for English language learners, for students in poverty is north of $200 million. I use $250 million. I know some people use a little bit different numbers, but that money needs to be added to the state school fund. Otherwise, you're just spinning the soup and taking money from other sources and shifting it to full day kindergarten. So I want to make sure that the OEIB understands that. So we would encourage you in your recommendations to the full OEIB and to the governor to make sure that that funding is included. Otherwise, you're just moving money around within the system, taking it from underserved populations, shifting it to full-day kindergarten. Similarly, we actually support the change from 0.5 to 0.6 for the English language learner funding. However, we would support that only if the additional resources to cover that change in the formula are included. Because again, you have that same issue. When you change the formula, you increase weights, you add weights. If you don't add the money to cover the cost of those weights, you're taking money from other sources. In this case, concerning for us, you'd be taking money from special education and students in poverty and regular education programs and shifting it to ELO. So we would support that as long as there's additional resources to cover those costs. The issues where we have some disagreement are on spending mandates, which has been discussed. Our state school funding formula is a distribution formula. It's not a spending formula. It's not, districts don't turn in receipts for how much it costs to educate individual kids. It's an attempt to recognize the various cost inputs around the state. So we would oppose spending mandates. Similarly, we would oppose incentives or bonuses inside the state school funding formula. We would support those outside of strategic investments, the things that Rob Saxon talked about, we think are absolutely necessary. The summer programs, incentives to graduate ELL students, but we would like to see those made as strategic investments outside the funding formula, the general school aid. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. It's not part of our protocol to ask folks. So it's not that we're not interested or we don't have questions, it's just not part of our process.
Just point of, just a question. I'm wondering if when we have our next round of questions, we can have an opportunity to hear more from some stakeholders that might directly have an impact, the impact of that.
Sure. Sure, I mean, I think that would be a question to the staff who are preparing the agenda on August 21st. And I don't know who is preparing the agenda for August.
There will not be public testimony on the August 21st work session. However, there will be opportunity for public testimony at the OEIB meeting.
Okay.
And it may not be public testimony, but maybe just getting from some of the key stakeholders, what are they thinking about the discussion?
Okay.
We also invite testimony and comment in written form at any time to share with the subcommittee.
So let's think about how to really, what I hear you saying is you want a little bit more of a dialogue than just listening, so I would invite the staff to think of some strategies to make that happen. If we could have Joyce Harris from Education Northwest join us, please.
Good morning, and I'm going to try to be very, very brief because if not, Nicole's going to get But I'm Joyce Harris. I'm director of the Equity Center at Education Northwest. And I what really made me come to this meeting this morning and clear my calendar is I knew that there would be some discussion about the equity lens. I work on the advisory subcommittee. And one of the concerns that I have is that I think that this, and I travel all over the country, all over the region, and outside of the region, and these statements, believe me, I share them with clients as far south as the Marshall Islands. And I want us to really breathe life into these belief statements. I know that, you know, we crafted the document, you know, went before the legislature. Unless we're able to translate these beliefs and internalize them so that as we talk about early learning, as we talk about 0 to birth, that we're able to reference these beliefs. This is why we are doing this. And I just wanted to really affirm the questions that have been added, ones that Nicole talked about this morning, so that in your mind, as you make decisions about resource allocations, you're constantly thinking about what would be the impact on babies, on the parents or the people who are providing care to children. We don't want to further disenfranchise them or make them the victims of inequitable policies and practices. So I just want to just say that let's use the language. And my other concern is we need to make sure that our communities understand what this equity lens is all about. You know, so that when people hear you come before a community group, that they have some sense of how this will either move the community forward or whether it will create some additional barriers. So I just want to say that based on, you know, my role as director of an equity program, I am available, and I know there are other people who are willing to work with you on beginning to look at how do we make sure that we make these actionable items important and visible to everybody, particularly the people whose lives are going to be most impacted. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. That's a wonderful way to close our meeting. Do you want to officially adjourn us?
Adjourn.